What made millions of Americans in the 1950s suddenly abandon fresh cooking and embrace frozen, factory made meals? For human history, the 1950s were an age of strange contradictions. It was a world where perfectly trimmed suburban lawns existed alongside nuclear missile silos that could open at any moment. Humanity had finally stepped out of decades of war and instability, yet the growing rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union pushed the Cold War into a new era of total confrontation. But beyond that, global anxiety. The 1950s were also an optimistic decade, defined by explosive industrial growth, rapid economic expansion, and the first true glimpse of modern consumer life. One of the era's most recognizable cultural symbols was the glowing television set sitting in the living rooms of countless American middle-class families, broadcasting the rebellious rhythms of Elvis Presley beneath flashing neon lights. And alongside this new wave of entertainment came a new way of eating. The TV dinner arrived in spectacular fashion, announcing that industrial civilization had officially entered one of humanity's most intimate spaces, the dinner table. In 1950, the Swanson brothers, children of Swedish immigrants, inherited one of the largest food companies in the United States from their late father. During World War II, the Swanson Company had supplied canned and frozen food products to the U.S. military. But during Thanksgiving, in 1953, the brothers badly misjudged market demand and ended up with more than 520,000 pounds of unsold turkey. Desperate to keep the meat from going to waste, company salesman Jerry Thomas drew inspiration from the aluminum meal trays used on airplanes and proposed an ingenious solution. Turkey would be paired with side dishes, separated into compartments, and sold as a complete frozen meal. Soon, a 98-cent frozen dinner featuring sliced turkey, cornbread stuffing, peas, and sweet potatoes was packaged inside a box designed to resemble a television set. The very first TV dinner was born. Swanson even created a simple but irresistible slogan for the product. Just turn the dial. Dinner is ready in 25 minutes. This innovation transformed an entire meal into something standardized, compact, and effortless, freeing American housewives from nearly every burden of kitchen labor. More importantly, it permanently fused television culture with America's rapidly evolving food industry for the very first time. By 1954, sales of TV dinners had already surpassed 10 million units. And just 1 year later, that number exploded to more than 25 million. Driven by this trend, America entered what many considered the golden age of convenience food culture. That same year, in 1953, Gordon's, one of America's oldest frozen seafood companies, introduced the first mass-market fish sticks. The product emerged during a period when post-war advances in fishing technology and the civilian use of military refrigeration systems caused seafood production to surge dramatically. At the same time, American housewives had little interest in buying and preparing whole fresh fish with scales, bones, and moisture still intact. So the company developed a new industrial process. Fish fillets with the bones removed were frozen into enormous rectangular blocks, then sliced into perfectly uniform 3.75-inch strips, almost like pieces of lumber in a factory mill. The strips were coated in breadcrumbs, quickly flash-fried to hold their shape, and transformed into frozen fish sticks, ready for the dinner table. Because the final product looked so symmetrical, standardized, and machine-perfect, it became one of the defining food symbols of 1950s America. In many ways, fish sticks embodied the industrial spirit of the 1950s, from top to bottom. They looked almost like Lego bricks from the sea, a perfectly engineered seafood meal that was safe, boneless, and easy to eat like candy. Before their arrival, it was still uncommon in America to hold the main course of a meal in one hand and eat it casually. So, the invention of Gordon's fish sticks did more than launch the frozen seafood industry. It also helped shape America's growing dipping sauce culture inside the home kitchen. Even the world-famous Chicken McNugget would later emerge along the path first opened by fish sticks. Then, in 1954, inside a U.S. Department of Agriculture Research Center in Philadelphia, scientists James Cording and Miles Willard developed a revolutionary drum drying method that made it possible to produce instant mashed potatoes, which could be rehydrated while still retaining a remarkably smooth texture. In reality, the origins of this technology could already be traced back to World War II. During World War II, dehydrated potatoes already appeared regularly in the rations of American soldiers. But the technology of that era relied mostly on harsh, high heat processing. As the potatoes were heated, their cell walls would rupture and release starch, turning the final product into a sticky paste. What soldiers ultimately ended up eating was little more than a bland lump that resembled wet paper pulp. The brilliance of the new drum drying method was that mashed potatoes were spread thinly across a heated rotating drum and dried almost instantly. This process preserved the potato's cellular structure far more effectively, allowing the product to regain its original texture and flavor once water was added back in. Later, the U.S. Department of Agriculture licensed this revolutionary technology to major food companies like Betty Crocker and Pillsbury, quickly transforming instant mashed potatoes into a beloved kitchen miracle across millions of American homes. And because these instant potatoes absorb moisture with remarkable consistency, many professional Western chefs eventually began using them as a secret weapon for thickening sauces and creamy soups. As more and more convenience foods flooded the market, quick and effortless meals naturally became the new stars of the American kitchen during the 1950s. Among the many dishes born from this era, one stood above the rest as perhaps the ultimate expression of canned food cooking: green bean casserole with cream of mushroom soup. The dish was originally created by American home economics icon Dorcas Riley and was later embraced by the Campbell Soup Company, which printed the recipe directly onto its soup cans as part of a brilliant marketing campaign. The recipe itself was unmistakably American. Canned green beans were mixed with canned cream of mushroom soup, topped with ready-made crispy onions or shredded cheese, then baked into a comforting casserole. Its greatest appeal was simplicity. There was no peeling, no chopping, and barely any preparation at all. Just open a few cans, mix the ingredients together, and let the modern industrial kitchen do the rest. Even Riley herself later admitted in old age that she never imagined this humble dish would eventually become part of America's culinary heritage. Its success was driven almost entirely by the marketing genius of Campbell's, which transformed a meal containing virtually no fresh ingredients into a symbol of warmth, family tradition, and modern American home cooking. Campbell's successfully transformed canned food into something that felt futuristic and modern. It was said that during Thanksgiving alone, American families prepared at least 40 million servings of green bean casserole every year. And more than 40% of those recipes relied specifically on Campbell's cream of mushroom soup. But even more astonishing was the fact that this was only one of the many culinary triumphs connected to the company's famous soup products. Another iconic dish of the 1950s, tuna noodle casserole, also rose to fame with Campbell's at its center. The origins of the dish could be traced back to the 1920s, when baked casseroles made with seafood or meat covered in rich cream sauces first appeared among wealthy American households. At the time, it was considered an elegant and expensive meal, but after World War II, advances in industrial fishing and increasingly automated food production lines transformed tuna, once regarded as one of the ocean's premium catches, into cheap and widely available canned fish. At the same time, the labor-intensive white sauces that once required careful preparation were replaced by Campbell's all-purpose cream of mushroom soup. And so a new generation of American urban women eagerly began combining canned tuna, noodles, and canned soup into quick and convenient casseroles that perfectly matched the rhythm of post-war modern life. Canned tuna, canned peas, and cream of mushroom soup were poured together into a baking dish, mixed with cooked instant noodles, then covered with generous layers of melted cheese and crispy potato chips before being sent into the oven. The result was a one-pan comfort meal that combined both the main dish and side dish in a single tray. Compared to the minimal effort required to make it, the warm, salty, creamy richness it delivered felt unbelievably satisfying for the price. In fact, the cost of making a single serving was sometimes less than 25 cents. It is no surprise that later sociologists would describe canned tuna, cream of mushroom soup, and instant pasta as the kitchen glue of 1950s America. and because this casserole often appeared in a pale grayish white color on camera. Americans even coined a special phrase during the black and white photography era. They called it 1950s gray, a term used specifically to describe the soft, muted tone associated with tuna noodle, casserole, and many similar dishes of the time. One more thing is especially worth mentioning here. The reason tuna noodle casserole became such a nationwide phenomenon was not simply because it was fast, affordable, and surprisingly delicious. Those advantages were only part of the story. One of the biggest forces behind its success actually came from religious tradition. Before Pope Paul VI issued reforms in 1966 that modernized many aspects of Catholic practice and daily life. Most American Catholics during the 1950s still strictly followed the custom of avoiding red meat on Fridays. As a result, tuna noodle casserole, cheap, simple to prepare, and completely free of red meat, became an almost universal Friday night dinner across countless American households. And so, inside that humble baking dish was far more than just an easy family recipe. It contained canned, low-cost protein from the industrial fishing economy, factory-produced condensed soup, filling noodles designed to feed entire families, and above all, the invisible influence of faith itself. In many ways, the casserole carried not only the power of modern industry, but also a quiet sense of religious devotion woven directly into everyday American life.